can we start by assuming the goal of every athlete should be to have good sleep habits, solid nutrition, and hydration patterns before we start implementing some of these higher level things that we're going to talk about today, Rick?
Well, certainly, Adam, but the question I throw to you and to listeners is what does that mean, right? We make broad-based statements of eat well. What does that mean for you? Sleep well. What does that mean for you? So, hopefully we'll be able to dive into understanding what's most important for you and me and Adam.
well,
Right?
well, touche to that. I,
Yeah.
I will, I will give you that. But I guess before we get into the real nitty gritty and juicy tidbits, can you tell our audience a bit more about yourself?
Sure. I am a physician and currently um, an educator. Also have a brand of products called PureClean Performance, which I am the formulator on. My background is, comes from engineering. So as a biomedical engineer, I was also I didn't really, I was a athlete in a variety of different ways. Currently, just more functionally staying fit and healthy. I actually competed in the sport of luge in the World Cup when I was younger. Um, Family's been really always very athletic. My son was a college baseball player. My daughter was a runner. My wife was a national ranked masters triathlete. So health and performance has always been, you know, part of our lives, as I'm sure
Yeah,
it is
sounds
for
like it.
everyone else. Everyone else's. So, my goal, I've always had a passion for health, and when I had a full-time practice up until I developed a nutritional product that sold quite well, and I could switch my gears into being more of a broad-based educator. Um, it's that passion for health, and that's still stays with me. And I think from a background is I try and provide practical, useful information for people. Seem to have a knack for sort of gathering information and providing it in a way that hopefully is something you can do today. And we all can study really deeply into the science of things, and which is awesome. But a lot of times, that's just hard science, and what are you going to do with it? So someone needs to do that, and then someone needs to take that information and make it practical for each person. And that's sort of where I see myself now. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's a great little description. But I'd say nutrition, hydration, it's a huge topic, and I think we can all agree about that. It can be a Pandora's box too, but luckily we do have medical doctor here to talk about to talk about some of these things in deep detail. So I first like to always start with performance implications, and knowing how and why some of these things work. So let's dive right into that first of all. And I'd say
Absolutely.
from the supplementary standpoint of the things out there that actually work to improve performance, Rick,
hmm
what are those things? What's like the number one thing that you'd start with?
Well, I will be I'll be biased, and we can go right into beats because you know, it's a well, while everyone's needs different. I mean, I'm assuming we have we're not dealing with more 20-year-olds. We're dealing with 40 and plus, and one of the things
We've
that
got everybody.
yeah,
Everybody.
yeah, okay, well, it's for everyone, but sort of a product that sort of I got involved in as sort of part of a broader based nutritional company that I had founded was this organic beet juice powder. And, it's just part of what we were offering. It was a comprehensive whole food supplement. It was whole food based powder. It was amino acids, some vitamin D and K. And a lot of what we were doing was assessing athletes, actually using physiological assessments. While they physically felt well, these physiological assessments actually showed that there were lots of holes in, their their key foundational nutritional needs. And by sort of creating a comprehensive plan for them, we were able to see dramatic results. It took some effort for people to do that. They had to take 6 or 7 different things they needed to retest, but when they did that, they did really, really well. One of the products we had was this organic beet juice powder. And just to sort of tell the backstory, is I had an opportunity to really dive deep into beet juice and nitric oxide at the time because the company that made this really unique beet juice powder decided to go out of business, right? And I love this product. I love the way they they sourced it. I love that they tested each batch and they wouldn't release a batch of product that wasn't um, tested for the actual nitrate content of the beets. And the third thing, which was really cool, was they used this light refractory drying technique, which there's only like 5 in the country. It actually uses super low temperatures. So when they dried the beet juice, this frozen concentrate, it's called bricks, sort of the particular concentrate amount, it was a crystalline powder as opposed to if you look at powders that you get a lot of times freeze dried or even um, less expensively spray dried, they are really light and fluffy. And
Hmm.
that's more damaging to the product. So this organic, deep, rich beet juice powder was just quite cool and it had a natural sweetness. So
So
that's
what
where
do
I
you mean?
went.
What do you mean damaging to the product? Like, why does that even matter?
Well, it's the heat. So,
Got
they're actually,
it. Okay.
so, you know, we'll use when things get heated at times, you can change some of the structure and nutritional content, and there's some data on that as well. The nitrates don't change, which are sort of the active nutrient or molecule that we need to create nitric oxide, but some of the other nutritional components of beet juice powder, whether they're betalains as antioxidants or betaines, become diminished. And particularly the betalains, which are sort of anti-inflammatory in nature, and
Hmm.
these betalains are responsible for that deep red color, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
anyone's who had beets and initially, and they go whoa, and it doesn't happen all the time, but you'll definitely see your poop get red, or sometimes even your pee gets a little red, and that's
Hmm.
a genetic. mm, the poop issue is pretty much everyone, but that's the beta lanes coming through. It's that dark red color, and in nature, anything with a deep color is those polyphenols, phytochemicals that have a protective nature to the plant, right? And that's why the plants develop these antioxidant chemicals to protect them from being eaten, as opposed to fruits, which are sweet, which are wanting to be eaten, right? So we could go down a rabbit hole of this,
Yeah,
but
there were starting a rabbit hole there, but
yeah. But the phytochemicals, important things there is they have a double-edged sword with regard to those. So that's where we got into beets and really understanding some of the science behind beet nutrition and the science of nitric oxide.
and
And
how does that deliver performance though? What is kind of the mechanistic process of dietary nitrate to nitric oxide in the body?
got it. Okay. So this is really important. It's sort of this key feature of nitrates are fixated by plants from nitrogen in the air. Okay. So then we eat these plants, and certain plants are higher or have more bioavailability of these nitrates in their substrate. Beets are one of the highest ones. So we eat the nitrates, they're actually taken into our mouth and they're either digested and we absorb them through our GI tract into our bloodstream, where they're converted in the GI from nitrates to nitrite. The nitrates are best converted, though, in the mouth. So the oral bacteria, actually healthy oral bacteria, start that process of converting nitrates to nitrites. Then nitrates then get converted in the body to nitric oxide. And it happens in a variety of different tissues. The predominant tissue is the interior lining of the arteries. It's called the endothelium. And there's an enzyme called eNOS, endothelium nitric oxide synthetase, right? That creates this. And for
Hmm.
a number for not too long ago, I don't know exactly, when we understood that there was other pathways was we thought that was the predominant way to produce nitric oxide. So getting back to your question, nitric oxide then increases blood flow, and blood flow increases tissue oxygenation. Nitric oxide is a gas that is only around for a few seconds. It's a really potent cell communication device, signaler is a better word for it. Now, from relating it to what we know, you don't see it very much, but certainly 30 years ago, people with cardiovascular disease, what they walk around with in their pockets. We all probably had a grandparent or maybe a father if we're a little bit older, who might have had cardiovascular disease and they
Nitro.
had nitro tablets,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I don't see that. Maybe our medicines are better and per se, but well, nitroglycerin, literally nitroglycerin, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Nitroglycerin stimulates super rapidly the formation of nitric oxide. What does that do? Open up the blood vessels of the heart, open up the blood vessels of the lung, open up the blood vessels in the penis, and guess what? More blood flow, no chest pain. That's how
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
works, right?
Yeah.
Pretty simply.
So more blood flow equals more oxygen to the working muscles, therefore go faster, do more, go harder kind of thing.
Correct. More blood flow to the muscles, more blood flow to the mitochondria, more oxygenation to the mitochondria where energy is produced, more ATP, go faster, go longer. You got it. Now,
Yeah.
the part two things. So as we get older, the lining of the vessels doesn't becomes less efficient. Now it becomes less efficient due to time, or we'll call it age, and that age could be a whole many different factors, right? Actually, the process of aging or the process of how you're living your life, so that it isn't as efficient, and it could be 50% reduced, and or disease, right? So if that progresses and someone has some disease in that lining, they can't produce as much nitric oxide. So that's where, with regard to the penis, that's where Viagra accidentally was discovered, where Viagra blocks the enzyme that breaks down nitric oxide. So it hangs around longer. And that's the
Hmm.
key. So the benefit of Viagra is it hangs around longer. They were actually trying to create a cardiovascular drug. Like that's where, and they couldn't get it to work in the heart, but it worked elsewhere. And lo and behold, a multi-billion-dollar
Yeah.
industry was created. And Viagra only came it was is 15, 18 years old, so it was early
Yeah.
2000s that it really started to come in, and we paid attention to testosterone. Now, so
Yeah,
so
that's
here,
that's crazy. I didn't think that we are going to be talking about penises and poop on the podcast today, but that's it's actually good
yeah,
background
yeah,
information.
okay, okay. So
Back
so so so
to
here's
performance.
where
Here we go.
it played. Yeah, so for performance. So as a coach, and anyone who's gotten older knows that they just can't do what they did when they were younger, even from an oxygenation. A lot of people can continue, but there's definitely a decline over time, and certainly a bunch of factors, play a role with that: age, disease, nutrition, testosterone, and so forth. But a huge factor is we don't produce as much nitric oxide. And if you can't produce enough nitric oxide in the vessels, you're just not going to deliver oxygen in the same way that you do when you were younger. Another way to think about nitric oxide is people who live at high elevation or train at high elevation. One of the benefits is you start producing more nitric oxide because you need to be able to utilize less oxygen. So the more efficient you're using oxygen, the better you're going to perform. Now, we didn't have a good way of doing increasing nitric oxide in the interior endothelium of the lining. People were using arginine and citrulline, and they helped, but the problem is they could go down a whole variety of different pathways. You take arginine, citrulline is better. It could be utilized any number of different ways. So it's like taking a funnel and or having some type of funnel was not just a single funnel, it'd be 10 different things, and you have to pour water in it, and it's not just going down the one you want, it's going to all
Mm-hmm.
different directions. And
Right.
some of those other pathways may not go to places you want them to go. So it's not like you could just take more. So the understanding, here's the cool thing, the understanding that these dietary nitrates are a workaround. So if you up your dietary nitrates, you can start producing more nitric oxide to make up for what you're lacking in your interior linings as you get older. And even if you're younger and fit, by taking more, right, you can, and this is sort of a more recent study with beet nitrates, is, they took high level trained athletes and they had them take, 50 to 75% more nitrates, and they showed improvement in performance. Where initially the thought was, oh, nitrates are going to only work for people who are less fit or less trained. And that's true. Like anything we do, right? Anything we do, you start up, you're going to see huge benefits. If you're really deficient, you're going to see huge benefits. And then that last extra push is always quite harder. Now, the problem with dietary nitrates is it's hard to get. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
Well, let me rephrase that. You can get dietary nitrates in beets and arugula, and you can get some of the other polyphenols that work with it, dark cocoa and pomegranate, that help the body utilize it. But to get enough to overcome that deficit in foods is really, really hard. To get 500 milligrams of dietary nitrates, you're eating 4 beets a day, right? You're eating, if that, right, depending on the actual nitrate in the beet. And that's where the advent of using these selected variety of beets that are processed and tested for nitrate content and then concentrated out, so you're getting, a large dose of these nitrates in a small a small quick substrate, makes a big difference. And
Yeah.
that's how you
Yeah.
can that's how you overcome this dietary dietary roadblock and the age challenge that we have to deal with.
And I want to get into that because I think that it's important for the listeners to hear how things are concentrated in a way to get enough dosage. But before we do that, would you say all ages and all athletes would benefit from a dietary nitrate supplement or food product?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
all athletes, certainly the older athlete and the ones that are sort of moderately trained, are going to see the bigger benefits as opposed to the younger, higher level athlete. But not to say that that younger, higher level athlete won't. They just are going to need to take more to sort of push themselves up to another level, because they're already at a high level
Yeah.
already. And that's,
Yep.
you know, the engine is working pretty well. So we have more room for error when we're younger,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But with that being said, I mean, with many of my athletes, once we get a lot of these things right in place with training, body composition, and all this kind of stuff, I'm a big proponent. I'm a big fan of beetroot product, and I've always been a fan of your product specifically because it actually works. It actually, you can see it. You can see elevated power with same or mildly suppressed heart rate, not suppressed in a bad way, but lower heart rate, higher power. And so let's talk about that right now, because the way you concentrate the products or where you're getting this nitrate from is actually pretty important. So how do you do it?
Yeah, so that is the most important thing when you're looking for, we're talking beets right now, a beetroot juice, right? So that's the first thing you need to look for. It needs to be a beetroot juice, because if you just take beetroots and pulverize them up and put them into a capsule or powder, you're getting all the fiber and other components to it, which isn't bad. It's just a general nutritional supplement, but you're not concentrating for the nitrates, and that's an important thing. So the way you need to do that is you need to take the beetroot, you need to juice it. First, you need to actually test the variety. There are particular varieties of beetroots that have higher nitrates than others. And this really, maybe only until 3, 4 years ago, was random, because they weren't growing it for until the beetroot market sort of started to expand. You would just randomly test for what the farmers brought in. And if you found one, right, if you found a good one, you'd grab it really quickly. And, the range can be 2.5 times. Like most commercial beets are 1% nitrate. and it's about 100 milligrams per 10 grams of product. The good, when you can get them now, they're up to 2.5 to 3%, but it's still hard to get because not everyone's growing it. So you need to test the beets, you need to juice them, and then you need to dehydrate them. And that is a more laborious process as opposed to, a where you don't test them, where you just use the beetroot itself. And I think the market for, you know, is better where most products now are beetroot juice, but most companies are not testing the actual beetroot juice concentrate for nitrates. And
But
I
you are at
we are,
PureClean
yeah, yeah,
Performance.
we
Yeah.
correct, right? Even a lot of the manufacturers don't, which
Yeah.
is, yeah, I think it's one of those we don't want to know. So if you're not going to ask, we're not going to tell. And not
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
getting a harmful but it's just not a product that's going to give you the same bang, you know, for, I guess, your buck or time. So that's
Yeah.
important. So the other thing, there's a process of fermenting. They have a fermentation process where you can actually take the fermentation of these beets. It's a multi-step process, and they actually re-add beet extract back into it, and there's a way to get the beet nitrate content up to over 5%. The problem with that is, the good thing is you're getting a super concentrated nitrate. The negative is it doesn't mix well as itself in as a powder. It's not that deep red, dark, um, crystalline organic beet juice, but you are getting more nitrates. And the other benefit to that of the powder is it's really mild in flavor. So, for us, we have the 100% beet juice, which has all the betalains and the dark reds, and it's about 2.5 to 3% nitrates. I think the last batch was a little over 3%, where the Beatums and Beta Brew use more of the fermented beet juice powder, which we don't need to put as much, and it just blends right into the ingredients really, really nicely. So you're getting more of the nitrate kick with that, but you're losing out on some of the betalains. But
So those products you just mentioned, those are some of the products at PureClean Performance, Beatums, Unbeatable Brew. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But
yeah,
you design everything specifically with like the right amount of dietary nitrate per serving in your products already, like whether it's a scoop or a bite or a whatever, right?
correct.
Yeah. So we don't
Yeah,
have to, like our audience members who are worried about getting in the milligram specificity. Basically, you take a dose of what you're serving, and they got it.
yeah. In a perfect, well, yes and no. So I think in a perfect world, so what I did, and I certainly don't mean to promote our products, but just sort of share,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah,
appreciate
just
that.
just share where we were thinking and sort of the logic to give you a better understanding of sort of the beet picture, right? So you have the beet juice, which is great, and it's the more nutritionally rounded one. Then you have the beetums, which are activated. The cool thing about beetums is they taste good and you can carry them with you, and they're activated in the mouth. So they sit there in your mouth, and you have more time for the oral bacteria to activate them. So they're a little bit lower nitrates per serving, but they may, and it's all individual and everyone's individual needs, but effectively they're a little bit stronger. The other two products, the Ambita Brew is more of a blend that actually has higher nitrates per serving than the Pure Clean powder. So, in a perfect world, I think people would do like one of each, or do half of a scoop of the Pure Clean powder and some Beetums, or Beetums are just sort of are thrown at any time, but um,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So yes, they're
Yeah.
sort of a serving. If someone's really trying to push, I would say choose two a day of something. One, even in a perfect world, one of something twice. Let me take that back. Two different products taken once a day, because you're going to get different actions based on how they were formulated.
Yep. Got it. Got it. And we'll talk. Excuse me. We'll talk about a few of those products here in just a
Sure,
second.
sure.
But let
Yeah,
me get one drink of water here as I
absolutely.
had a hard ride today using my beatums and whatnot. So
Yeah.
um Excuse me.
So there's
But
one other thing to
so
mention. One other
let's
thing to mention.
actually,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I
So
wanted to
when
say
you're,
actually one
yeah,
thing
go ahead.
about dietary nitrate. So you
Yep.
mentioned the um, bacteria in the mouth. So if
Correct.
you kill that bacteria, are you killing the dietary nitrate? And what are some applications there, practical applications?
Correct. I mean, you're definitely lessening the activity of the nitrates, and there's been studies with regard to using antibacterial mouthwashes, such as Listerine, they actually show increase in blood pressure, right? It's like, what? Well, the antibacterial, whatever dietary nitrates you're using are not going to be or eating are not going to be as effective, and we actually see subtle changes in blood pressure. And you also see that with antacids. Antacids, since you need a particular amount of acid to actually convert those nitrates to nitrite. If you're blocking those acids, then again you have an issue with blood pressure, and those are in the scientific literature. Not
So if
huge
you're if,
differences, but there's definitely a significant difference.
so if you're brushing your teeth using mouthwash or antacids after you take dietary nitrate supplements, that's not a good thing. That's what
That
you're
would
saying.
be yeah, that wouldn't be a good thing. And if you want the effects of dietary nitrates for performance, you definitely want to stop the antibacterial mouthwashes because they're just going to keep that natural bacteria. There's a trade-off. We need healthy bacteria in our mouth. Just find another way to have a fresher breath. That, right?
Well, yeah, and hopefully we don't need fresh breath necessarily to ride bikes. So I guess for
Yeah, yeah,
for all the listeners out there, I brush my teeth in the morning, take some beetroot powder in a smoothie in the morning, train, come back, brush my teeth then if I want, or brush my teeth later on in the day. So
yeah.
no
There you
no
go.
need to worry about that. But I did want to mention that because a lot of athletes who are taking dietary nitrate, they don't understand that. And the
No,
antacids, for example. So I wanted
right.
to mention that.
No.
So speaking of things that increase blood flow, you also mentioned the Unbeata brew. So it's a caffeine cordyceps dietary nitrate thing. But let's talk about caffeine.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
does
yeah.
that work, and how do you include it into your products?
Okay, yeah. So caffeine, obviously, caffeine. People have used it. They notice the effect. We notice, and we know, especially for people who aren't sensitive, that increases mental focus. Increases reaction time, and that's really important for any athletic performance. The other thing that caffeine, does is stimulate energy utilization, oxidations of fat. So that's the other benefit of caffeine. Now, Chris Kresser wrote an article, and I can send that to you. It's like, yeah, let me find. It's like here it is. It's great. Coffee is good for you unless it's not, right? So uh, everyone is different, and so I'll preface: caffeine is good for you unless it's not, right? We hear studies:
Okay, fair enough.
we
Fair enough.
we drink lots of coffee, it's good for health. People who drink more coffee have better heart disease risks, and blah blah blah. So, and these are epidemiological studies, which are useful, but a lot of flawed because they're not looking at you. They're looking at large groups of population, and maybe for half of that group it's awesome, for a quarter it's and for a quarter it's bad. Well, where do you lie within that realm? Well, the same thing for caffeine. It depends so much on what your genetics are. Are you a fast oxidizer? That means you drink caffeine. You could drink caffeine at 11 o'clock at night and you can go right to bed, right? Or someone else is they're going to be up for 3 days. Depends on their particular genetics. And you can test for that. Also depends on their lifestyle, right? If you're a smoker, here's like, why do cigarettes and smoking go together? You can keep drinking a ton of coffee. Well, turns out cigarette smoking slows down the ability to detoxify things. Well, that's yeah, another risk of
Shocker, real
shocker,
shocker.
right? So you could
Yeah.
drink more coffee because it, it it's affecting. I think I said that backwards. It actually enhances it, but it's sort of more complicated than that. But it's breaking down the caffeine more rapidly. And
So
what
how do you know if you're a fast metabolizer of caffeine or not? Like, how do you figure that one out?
Right. So how do you figure that out? You could do genetic testing. I mean, that's to truly know. You could figure that out like just by what your response is, right? So if you're someone who has coffee in it and it causes you to have, you know, it's not necessarily even the anxiety because you could metabolize it reasonably well, but some people also have another genetic, we'll call them SNP, they're called, um, that blocks this adenosine receptor in the brain, and when that happens you're more stimulated by the coffee and you get more anxious. So there's variables, and I'll throw in the other variable: if you drink citrus juice, that actually blocks the liver and you have more exposure. So you have this combination of genetics, combination of lifestyle, when you're having it, what food you're having it, and so forth. So it can become quite complicated. um, but so like my recommendations for, let's simplify this out for you. Is certainly you can test for it and you can determine if you are a fast or slow oxidizer. And I'll give you a perfect story for me. I'm not really a coffee drinker. I'm not someone who needs caffeine to wake up and get going. It's just something I've never done. But when we developed on Beta Brew, I really liked it. I don't love coffee, but a latte or there's some Beta Brew with some oat milk or some coconut milk was pretty good. So I started drinking every day, and I liked my performance. And then about 2 3 weeks later, I started noticing like I got a little sweaty afterwards, and like I was just like racing a little bit, and happenstancely, I'd just done a genetic test and it came back I was a slow metabolizer. So it took me, someone who detoxifies pretty well in general, but it took me a couple weeks of regular use to go, okay, everyday caffeinated coffee is just not something I need or should do. But so for in my case, I just use it periodically. We actually have a decaffeinated version, but the caffeinated version, I'll use it when I need it or when I want that extra boost, and I feel a bigger bump. And that's for someone else. It's like, the more you drink coffee, the more you have caffeine on a regular basis, the the more your body utilizes it and breaks it down, so you get less of an effect. So from an athlete's point of view, is sort of figuring out what your needs are. Maybe 1 cup a day is just fine, and you metabolize it quickly, and you have it in the morning or you have it just before training, and you're great and you're good to go. But someone else, 1 or 2 cups every day is way too much, so they may be just fine using it before a hard workout or before a race. As long as it doesn't
Yeah.
overstimulate them.
Yeah, my go-to has always been, try it in training first, and then if it works positively, we will use it in the race. But if it, increases anxiety, if it increases heart rate exponentially, meaning the ventilation is just out of control, and you feel like your chest is about to explode, either lower the dosage or just don't do it at all. So I think the takeaway here is caffeine, it's well proven to increase athletic performance, but if it is bringing adverse effects, don't use it.
Right.
And
And
find
yeah, and I even go even further than that, is like, don't wait until it causes like a clear apparent, negative effect. You can get a clue, like using, I have an aura ring, right? And sort of I know we're going to chat maybe a little bit about COVID and immunity. They're using aura rings now to sort of pick up people with increase in body temperature, increase in heart rate, increase in respiratory rate, heart rate variability. So whether it's just taking your blood pressure or heart rate variability, sort of get a sense of what that caffeine does to you. And it may be really subtle. It may be like, for me, my blood pressure just went up 5 to 10 points, and I would have never noticed that. But after 2 to 3 weeks of it, your body picks up on it. So some of these subtle cues that we may not, physically notice are definitely having a physiological effect. So some type of tracking, and we can probably talk more about that if we have time, is really critical. For
Yeah,
instance,
well, that is good, and we're spending a lot of time on performance, and we only have a short amount of time, but that's actually a pretty decent segue to start talking about general health and wellness.
Hmm.
And I guess I want to ask you, what is your approach to general health and wellness? Like, what's your philosophy?
Um, I think I've sort of shared before is know yourself. Sort of dig in and understand that there's not one mm, one method, one diet, one way that is going to be best for everyone. We're all different, so you have to know your body, and you have to listen to your body. We're so out of touch a lot of times, and athletes are better. That's why I like working with athletes. I used to tell the story of a diabetic who came into my office and was in a wheelchair. He just had his toe cut off and he was on 5 different medications. And I said, "How are you doing?" He says, "I'm doing awesome." I'm like, I'm shaking my head. It's like, "What do you mean doing?" Well, doc added a new blood pressure medicine onto my protocol and it's good. He says it's good now. I'm great. It's like, oh my gosh, right? And then literally the next person who came in was, a high level athlete, and they just had this one issue with, I forget, it was like their knee. It was bother them when they went up high levels and intensity, and it was just driving them crazy, right? So everyone's perception of what's important. Obviously, the athlete was much more in tune, and we sometimes can get overly in tune with our body. So know your body, and the second thing that to know is humans are super super adaptable. One of our blessings and curses is you can eat a carnivore diet or you could be vegan, right? Go. And
Yeah,
I know people have gone both
straight up.
ways, right? And
Yeah,
oh, I did great on a vegan diet until they didn't, or I did really good in that carnivore diet until they didn't. So um, you know sometimes nutrition becomes a religion, and not to say, I can weigh in on what might be better for the majority of people, but everyone's unique. So listening and having some way to track and understand what's best for you, and that's important. And I'd say the third thing is, I'll say to don't put crap into your body, right? It's like,
yeah,
with whatever we do, it's like, toxins. Get toxins out of your body. That could be toxic foods, toxic emotions, toxic environment, toxic, personal care products, because that's a given, right? We do urinary toxin tests on people to look at metals and chemicals, and more and more these days. I didn't see it as frequently, but in the past few years, it's like the people who have levels of certain chemicals in their system that are way over 99 percentile are very, very frequent. It
oh,
freaks me out
yeah,
actually, how much of
yeah,
a problem, and we don't look at it. So, from that level, it's really important because everything you do, you know, is going to be affected if your body's clogged in some way.
yeah. No, I love those 3 points. By the way, I couldn't agree more. And I think that that's what muddies the water a little bit. Is that we as human beings are very adaptable, and that's a good thing. But that means that we'll try to adapt around a bad stress if there's a bad stressor there. But kind of a simplistic way is put good in, get good out; put bad in,
Hmm.
get bad out. And when I was searching for some questions before this, as I was kind of uh, drafting up some questions for this podcast, and oftentimes health and wellness were um, somewhat defined medically as absence of disease. Like
Hmm.
if you're absent of disease, then you must be healthy. And I'm not a believer in that. I baseline is not the goal. It has to go above and beyond. And that's kind of what you're talking about there. Like you need like a holistic wellness, mind, body, and kind of that output of what you want your body to do and perform.
Correct, correct. Absolutely. And just because you've gone to your doctor, and he says everything's great, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, it means as much as I'm looking, you don't have an outright disease that's going to need a new medication today. Come back when you're sick, basically. And
Yeah.
I apologize of being too, but it sort of is, because we only have the amount of traditional world only has a certain amount of time. to dig deep into each person. It is complicated. It does take time and effort, and a lot of people just aren't interested in digging that deep to try and understand what they can do to optimize their health and performance. You know, I take personally, a longer approach, and I'm saying, okay, what are we trying to treat? And well, we're trying to treat death, right? And yet, yes, are we going to win?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, right. Okay, we're trying to treat aging. Aging is the disease, and that's going on every moment, every second, every minute. Our body's getting older, and it affects us. And the old paradigm is we can't do anything about that. Well, the new paradigm, which there's many millions and millions of dollars being invested in, is yes, we can. And in fact, the disease of aging is what causes immune senescence, you know, aka more susceptibility to viruses, and what causes cancer and what causes heart disease, and so what's going on genetically, and what can we do with our lifestyle and nutrient protocols, and whatever it might be that's coming up next, to sort of address that as a primary issue. Because the more you're sort of chipping away, or or I envision holding back, right, that process, the stronger your body is going to be in the meantime. So trying to take a offensive approach. We tend to be we tend to be really defensive in
Hmm.
Western medicine. So we're going to take an offensive approach and attack what we know the big issue is. And are you going to win that battle? Not today. Could we win it in 30 years? Who knows, right? Or could we hold that off for 20, 30, 40 years, and 20 years? Very possibly. So how do we do that? And that's the question I ask myself all the time. And for people who are interested, it's like, how do we do that? And what do we know today, so that we can make changes? So every day, at least, we're trying to do something a little bit better for ourselves.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And a point blank question for you is, for our listeners, what would you recommend for them to increase their awareness? Like, how can they increase their awareness of putting vitality into their lives?
Hmm. You want to
I mean,
rephrase
sure,
it?
you can do
Yeah.
you can do
Right. Yeah.
genetic tests, you can get some data points and all this kind of stuff, but like, just kind of a straight up, and I know I'm going off script here, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
kind of like, shine it to me, is like, how can we bring that awareness to athletes? I do it through data in
Yeah. Yes.
training. Like, there's a training stimulus and all this kind of stuff. But
Okay.
as a kind of a medical doctor, and from the kind of supplementary standpoint, how would you
Okay.
recommend
Yeah. Yeah.
bringing
Okay.
awareness to the
Yeah.
athlete?
So obviously, the first and most important thing is, how do I feel today? Right?
Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure, 100%.
Let's sometimes we're like, oh, I have to do this. I have to train this way. I have to. It's like, no, right? Um, Listen to your body, and yes, I'm sure you'd say, as a coach, there's places for overreaching, and pushing a little bit past fatigue so you can recover. But from the broader standpoint is, how am I feeling today? Should I push hard, or should I just chill out and take a long walk, or should I get in a sauna, or maybe I need to go to bed a little earlier because something's just not right. And I'll just give you a simple example. And for me, is like, 2 days ago, I did a strength workout, and I do these slow 2 minute, um, 20 seconds up and down of particular weights. And the whole workout was really good. And I got to the last one, which is curls, which are really painful to go 2 minutes, really slow. And everything was good on that last set of that last one. I couldn't do the third rep. I'm like, what the heck? Like, and because I had been, it's a sticking point, that third one, but I had the last two times I broke through, and I go, that's weird. And I sort of put it off to my shirt. And then I do a sauna afterwards, and I went I'll do a quick cold shower, and like, it was really cold. I'm like, okay, something's off, right? It was like, it didn't feel right. And I noticed yesterday and today a little bit, like, allergies have kicked in. I'm a little bit scratchy in my throat. It's like, oh, okay, I get it, right? So just that. really, and I'll take a metric even the night before. My sleep metric, my deep sleep was down. So there, I sort of combined paying attention to why didn't I finish that little rep where I've been doing it, and the water was a little colder. I didn't really want to do the cold hormesis, and my sleep was off. So something's brewing. And then yesterday, boom, I'm scratchy, and this morning I sneezed a bunch, and so there it was, right? I don't think I have corona, but something was coming in.
Let's hope
So,
not.
so how do you do that? Is pay attention to your body and use some type of metrics. And there's a variety of different metrics that I love, whether it's an Oura ring or some sleep metrics. The ones that we do some longevity protocols, and there's some powerful ones like heart rate, temperature, reaction time is actually really key. Heart rate variability I like because it gives us some long range data, and there's people who will say, oh, it's great. People don't like it, don't like to use it. It's very useful. It just doesn't tell us everything. It's sort of putting these different metrics together. But there's a particular device called Brain Gage, and what it does is it measures cognitive ability, reaction time, and fatigue, like cognitive fatigue. And that's something we can relate to. So you wake up that next morning and you're a little bit off, you take your reaction times down 10%, and your decision making time is not quite as quick. Well, guess what? Something's off, right? And it's a quick little test, and it's meaningful because if your reaction time is off, maybe not as important for an endurance rider unless a car's going to come at them, but there's a sign of fatigue in your body, and pay attention to that.
So is
So
this pre or post coffee in the morning that you're
I
using
would
brain gauge?
ba- baseline. Yeah, 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 for sure. So it's sort of looking
Oh,
at heart rate variability, or some at brain gauge in the morning. These are going to be important metrics to sort of say, listening, how am I feeling, and putting this together with your goals so you can then determine what to do. From a bigger picture, like labs are great, but you certainly can't use labs on a regular daily basis. You know, from a testing perspective, there's two. I mean, there's a lot, but there's two that I really like. Is sort of a comprehensive serum chemistry, a full comprehensive, not just we're going to check your lipids, but looking at certain metabolic markers, hormonal markers, um, glucose metabolism, and then running those through. There's some computer algorithms now where actually we'll look at all this data and say, aha, right? This is the patterns that we're seeing that, my human eyes would not pick up. And it might say, hey, we're seeing a deficiency in magnesium, or this is linked to this pituitary axis imbalance. And that's really helpful, to sort of, it's not I like to use the ship analogy. Okay, you're going to sail from, New York to London. You know where you're sailing, where you want to get, but that's your long range plan where you're going to do bigger direction changes. But it's that day to day. Obviously, what's the wind doing today? What are the waves? Do I have to deal with the storm that have to go around? And that's the metrics and how I feel. And then the other
yeah.
the other the other test I really like is everyone at some point, certainly genetics, but even like looking at chemical and metal burden, because I just see that as you just don't want to miss it. It's like if it's something in your system, you could get it out. And why live with high levels of thallium? Because they're using fracking water to spray kale in California with on organic vegetables without telling you. Or you're a swimmer and the way they're ozonating the water is you're exposed to perchlorates, which will affect your thyroid. Or right, I could go on with like stuff that holy
Right,
crap,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah, you just
Yeah,
wouldn't
and
even.
that's some scary stuff. And I would say, I mean, if people are recognizing some adverse things, within their training or themselves or their awareness, I mean, you go to a medical expert, whether it's yourself or local doctor. But I think to kind of bring the message back home is like bringing that awareness requires like a stimulus, like you're training or you're testing or you're doing something, and then you evaluate on that and you record it, whether it's pen and paper or an online database of some kind, but a perceived effort of qualitative, quantitative using Training Peaks, for example. There's plenty of metrics in there. Using wearables and in kind of sleep monitors as well to start monitoring a lot of these aspects that can make you feel certain ways. And I always say, make that number, take that number and make a feel to it, bridge it to the feeling. And I think
Exactly.
that's the
That's
big thing.
yeah. And you said it earlier with regard to, like, let's go back to, my wife is like, will not get on her bike without a power meter. It's just like, it's just, to her, to ride without a power meter is like a
Yeah, she's seen
wasted,
the light, man. She's seen the light.
right,
It's fine.
is a wasted ride, because so, and the beat nitrates, and I didn't have a chance to follow up. It's like, totally, you'll see power maintain the same and less per lesser heart rate. And the other thing that's sort of cool is you'll see quicker recovery. So, like, when you're doing intense protocols or intense, intervals, like, to me, I don't know, from a coaching perspective, is like, I like to see how quick people recover. To me, that's a sign of a strong cardiovascular system. It's not how hard you can push your heart rate up. So if you're doing a 1 minute really hard, how soon can you get back to 80% of that max heart rate? And that's, when your cardiovascular system is really good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not who does the most training; it's who can recover the fastest, because then they do the most training. That's kind of the way I think about it.
Exactly.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, we do want. I want to touch on a few of the things, so we might have to kind of push through this. But I point out the elephant in the room. We're living in a pandemic right now, which is kind of crazy. But to just stay healthy and kind of, is there anything that we can do to boost up our immune system right now and maybe prevent some virus overtaking our bodies? What would you
Well,
say to that, Rick?
I think everything that we've spoken to with regard to performance, anything that we've paid attention to, with regard to solid sleep, I think we haven't mentioned some of the other lifestyle components. So you asked what's important to me. It's not finding a vaccine or not taking this herbal immune blend, right? And not to say that you know they may or may not be helpful, but we're relying on something else to support us, to give us this strong foundation of health. We can take this opportunity now to change our habits, to become a healthier, stronger person, where, what, I'm not, I'm approaching this, 59, right? So I'm approaching oh, you're over 60. Well, no, right? My immune system is not anywhere what, the average epidemiological 60 would be. So
Right.
I'm not concerned at all, right? In fact, I think I probably had it coming back from Mexico. It was not pleasant for 5 days, but 4 or 5 days, but it went away. So, um, getting sun in the morning, right? Waking up, getting some sun in your eyes, going barefoot on the ground, to get grounded to the earth. There's a thing about grounding, to getting out of EMF fields, um, shutting off some, the things that we hear all the time. Don't be staring at computers before you go to bed. Eat 3 hours before bedtime. Staying away from lots of sugars and alcohols. All these things that are just, I guess,
The
to me,
basics. The
right, or
basics.
just
Yeah.
the basics is, taking some, taking a walk and be mindless, or if you like meditation or deep breathing. All this stuff, which we know is super good, is now even more important than ever. And that's sort of the critical factor here. Unfortunately, you don't hear any of that from, the powers that be. No, because we don't want. I don't either. It's just the model, or we don't want. We'll go down the rabbit hole. We want to give people a fix, right? We want to
Yeah.
say a vaccine's going
Yeah.
to fix it. Well, maybe not. Maybe we need to fix ourselves, and the people, not solely, but the people who are more at risk are the people who are ill and inflamed and have issues. And I'll sort of throw the two components that you don't hear. It's actually sort of cool. I saw one, 23andMe's doing some data searching with regard to people who are genetically susceptible to this cytokine inflammatory storm that seems to happen and causes lung issues. And so we start looking at who's more genetically susceptible. Well, that would be really helpful to know. And then we make this blanket assessment of, well, you're over 60, you're at risk. Well, yeah, because you're older or if you're diseased. But, the real risks are, what's your immunity? I don't understand why we're not, I understand it's just not, it's expensive and it's not part of the marker. But, we talked about the aging before. There are two key components of the aging immune system. It's, especially with viruses, it's your T cell count. And there are um, subsets of T cells, which are sort of the immune component from our thymus gland, that deal with, invaders. And we have these naive T cells, which are sort of what we have when we're younger. We have a ton of them. They haven't sort of been decided what they're going to become, right? And they're there
Hmm.
waiting to
Hanging out.
become whatever they need to become. And then we have these senescent cells. It's like they're done, right? They're cooked, they're damaged, and sometimes they're even called zombie cells because they're going out and making the other cells in your body sick or causing harm to them. They're just bad guys. So when we get older, we have less naive cells. We can't mount a new attack, and we have all these senescent cells, just sick people and in wheelchairs hanging around, getting in the way, and you can't mount it.
Zombies.
Right,
Zombies
basically.
getting
So
in the way.
we can you can assess those. I mean, there's a so you can actually look at whatever your age is and see what your naive senescent cells are. And that's going to give you a strong indication of what your core immunity is. Now, that would be really good to know. If, and I've seen people, who are younger who have really poor naive senescent cell ratios, like not like a 70-year-old, but they're 35 and it's like they're 20 years behind. So they're immune aging. And it's that immune aging which kills people, not from the virus, yeah, but from pneumonia. I mean, so if heart disease and cancer doesn't get you, our number one cause of death is infection. And that infection occurs as we're older because of just what I shared you. So knowing that is really, really critical. And we should be, if I were in charge, that if I could scale that up, because I would say, all right, if your immune system's strong, get out in the world,
Right.
get infected, develop immunity, and if your immune system is weak, do what you need to do to get healthy. And here's what we need to do. We need to do this and change your life, and we need to give you thymus peptides. Like there are certain little protein peptides. One's called thymosin alpha 1, TA1, which is really potent thymus stimulant. And that can sort of re-trigger some of that immune um, support. There are lots of pharmaceutical companies now looking into removing senescent cells, certain take medication cocktails to remove this burden of senescent cells. So, and there's a number of other things one could do that don't. So that would be a huge benefit to the population. We wouldn't have to shut down our whole world. We could just be supporting the people who are at greatest risk. So,
So
um,
Rick Cohen 2024. Is that what
yeah,
I'm?
right. There
Yeah,
I
yeah.
go.
Well,
There,
to that point of exploring how to do that more. I mean, you're actually creating something that allows our listeners to do that. And before we get into that, I've always been a big fan of for my athletes creating a performance team around the athlete, and that includes coach, doctor, sports psychologist, team manager, or you name it. I mean, just a lot of people, resources, things to help enhance and develop performance. And one thing that you started doing that I realized is you've created this members club. And I don't it's not a, maybe a soft sell for it or whatever, but I think it's actually unique and interesting. And it's a vehicle to help our listeners explore more about what all you've talked about today, from the immunity aspect to the performance aspect to the health and wellness. So could you tell us a little bit more about, like, just the kind of 2-minute elevator pitch of
yeah, yeah.
members club?
Sure, sure. Well, here's my actually asked my wife earlier. It's like, okay, why do you need to why do you need the members club? Is to make your life easier, your health and performance stronger, all while saving you hundreds of dollars. All right, so that's my elevator pitch.
There
But
he is.
yeah,
Perfect.
there you go, done.
Go ahead. Some detail.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, we're
Some
done.
details there.
Yeah. So okay. So as you can hear, like as I sort of shared, and it's my passion is just a whole variety of different topics, and really enjoy educating and working with people that want to learn. It's one of my greatest frustration when I was a practicing physician. It's like I always felt as sort of a functional alternative or non-Western, although Western trained, but I was like the doc of last resort. Now that's changed over the past 10 to 15 years for sure, but people just sometimes don't want to change, and it's like for me that was really frustrating. I and that's, so where I've been working with is, sort of PureClean Performance and beetroot juice. And just an aside, there's studies on, if we're talking, forgot to add that on beetroot juice and nitric oxide and immunity. And there's a study currently going on in China with Viagra and its effect on COVID. And there's studies on nitric oxide gas actually inhaling and supporting the lungs. They had great results with SARS um, 10 years ago. So that was sort of beetroot juice does fit into your immunity protocol in a deeper way than performance. So
Perfect.
just yeah, just sharing beetroots. I really want to be able to share in a much bigger way for people, to cut through so much clutter, whether it's a marketing hype of a product that is just so wonderfully marketed, and you do I'll call it a supplement sleuth of the label, and this $59 product for 14 servings costs them $5 to make, and it's it looks great, but you look at the label and it's like right? Or it's this new podcast and this new diet and this new information. So trying to simplify that for people, like what we did today. What's going to be most practical for you? What one step can you make? So that's a huge part of it. Um, we'll grow and expand that as we go. But the most practical thing initially is using sort of the power of a club and my access as a physician to discounts and products and lab testing, and negotiating pricing with Mind Valley, for online training, or certain companies that I really like that are offering cool products such as the Brain Gauge, right? Or a Mark Pro
Right.
recovery device. And so I can go to them and say, hey, look, we're going to have this membership. I'd really like to offer the members whatever discount you could give them. We'll send you people. And unlike a podcaster per se who might have an affiliate link, who's splitting and getting profit from that, and certainly it's a commercial and they need to sponsor their program. I don't want to do that. The membership is where the membership cost is where we're making our money, and our goal is just to provide as much benefit to you, like a Thrive Market online membership for a year
Yeah.
and be part
Yeah.
of it. So that's the idea and the
Got it.
philosophy.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So so if our audience members are curious about this, I mean, how would they find out more?
yeah, so right now, just email me, Rick at PureClean Performance. Today, we're recording this on April 9th, and we will be doing a launch, sort of a founder's launch, next week for about 10 days. So if you're listening to this during that time, great. I can send you all the information. But if you're listening to this in May or June, and you're just getting around to it, just email me anyway, and we'll be much more functional by then. But I'll still be happy to sort of honor some of the founders, members, special
Cool.
offers. Yeah,
Cool. So it's Rick at purecleanperformance.com.
Rick at purecleanperformance.com. Correct.
Got it. Okay. Well, good. No, that's great. And for anybody who this podcast is, their trigger has been tripped by a lot of this stuff. Send Rick an email. He loves to geek out about a lot of this stuff, and the members club might be of interest to you. So, Rick, this is awesome. We're kind of going a little bit over the time, but I've got three questions that I want to ask you. Some takeaways for our listeners to apply to their training and nutrition and health and wellness program. So let's knock those out, and then
Sure.
we'll cap this thing off. All right.
Absolutely.
So first question: if you are a performance-driven athlete and you had a budget for only one supplement, what would you go with? So in other words, is there a holy grail of sorts? Can you just give me one?
Yeah, no. So and I'd say it depends, right? There is no
For
magic
sure.
solution. And,
For
it
sure.
depends on what's your age, what's your state of health. If you're, so is it an amino acid for recovery is going to be more important? Is it a beet nitrate that's going to be more important for you? So, or is it foundational nutrition is going to be more important for you? So, yeah, so I guess my message would be don't fall for there's one magic fix for you, because you really
Yeah.
need to figure out what your needs are and then just prioritize what's most important. And I would say most important is a lot of the things we talked about today is taking care of your health in a more comprehensive way, and tracking however you might do, before resorting to buying something.
Yeah, man, I was just gonna say, I didn't plan this. I knew that that was kind of the direction you go. I didn't plan this, but the holy grail might be awareness. Is just
Yeah,
like figuring out who you are, what works, what doesn't.
yeah, and
That's probably the holy grail.
and have support. Like someone like
Yeah,
Adam,
exactly.
someone like us, people who, or just a group of people that you can work with that can give you feedback on, hey, this is something that worked for me, and then try it, and that's okay too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Question two: when looking at quality control for ingredients, what should our listeners be looking for in a product? Like, is there a stamp? Is there a brand? Is there a thing to look for in the supplement industry right now, or what's going on?
Yeah. Uh, Yeah, it's interesting, having spent a bunch of years in there. So just to give you a, lifting up the the skirt, you look at products on Amazon, and honestly, anyone can go to any contract manufacturer who does have criteria in, in in cleanliness and lots of paperwork, etc. But you can put together anything you want of any quality, put a label on it, and get it on Amazon. There's no one saying that that's a good product or a bad product. So, um, I think be aware of that. I would also say look at what's actually on the label. It takes some experience, but certainly there are ingredients that are very inexpensive versus ingredients that are perhaps maybe trademarks. So typically, if a company has a trademark ingredient, there's some clinical research at least behind that particular ingredient. So that's useful. I would say looking at a label, if a company cares enough to put non-GMO, organic, or Whole 30, or putting some markers, while it may be a marketing ploy, at least they're conscious enough and care enough to
Yeah,
to, to put organic. And we can debate whether organic on some things are better or not. But you know what? If they're putting organic and they're searching for it, at least it's a step up. Um, than someone who doesn't care at all. It's like we use in our amino acid a natural sweetener, organic berry flavor, as opposed to a cheap, you know, aspartame, sucralose sweetened formula that you might get in a bodybuilding type amino acid formula. So they're just not, they're gone for the low end, as opposed to, so fortunately you're going to pay a little more for that, but like anything, do you like a fine wine? Do you like a cheap Ripple? So,
right.
and I think
Yep.
the third thing would be it's typically you're safer on professional brands. Um, so one of the things in the club is you'll have access to this Elevate platform of professional brands that are actually vetted by this professional dispensary, and they go through all the criteria and they won't sell anything. They're not perfect. I found a couple issues, but they're really good for the most part. But they
Mhm.
won't sell anything of lesser quality. And typically, the brands that are selling to health practitioners are obviously been around longer. They're not just slapping labels on something to take advantage of a marketing sale or to put it on Amazon. So they're more established companies. So for the most part, you're going to do better with those.
Gotcha. So do your homework. Go with some legitimacies, people that've been around with for a while, and some intentionality too. If they're sourcing their products in a specific way, I like that.
Yeah, and I'd say wait, one more thing just on beet juice. If you don't
Yeah.
want to order ours, ask. I challenge you and just order product and ask. Try and contact the company and get a COA, certificate of analysis, and see if they even know what their nitrate levels are. 95% won't, and or you see if you can even get one. So that's a really really important thing.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, and we keep on coming back to beetroot because it's. I mean, I love the product, but one thing I didn't tell you, Rick. I've been using or have athletes been using your product since I think 2014 because I was working full time at CTS. Who knows? This might have been before that. Anyway, my project was to research kind of the best dietary nitrate out there, the best beetroot product out there that had quantifiable dietary nitrate that is sourced, and you were the only one that I could find at the time. And I then we started using on professional athletes, and away we go. And then we kind of circled back around a couple of years ago when
yeah,
when I
right.
moved here to Washington, and we had that first conversation. So for what it's worth, there's not too many people doing what you do out there. So just
It's
want to
hard.
mention that.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate it. It's just
Yeah,
challenging, and it's sort of like you either have to care enough, and then the double-edged sword is if you get too big, and there's some big companies out there, it's hard to source. So it's
right,
not,
right.
this is a natural product that has some variability and difficulty, and the large company out there without, does a decent job at it, but they just make sell too much to be able to, and they require a marketing budget and a margins to, you know, just to offer the same product. It just can't be done at that level.
Gotcha. Okay, last question. So, if we can be judgy for just 1 minute, what is the number one thing that you see most athletes doing wrong in their nutrition game, and how can they correct it?
Not knowing who they, sort of a repeat, just not knowing who they are, not knowing what their
Uh,
particular needs
Awareness.
are,
Yep.
and just falling, oh, okay, I'm going to do ketones, right? And like think about it. Now we're doing ketones, and 5 years ago we're doing carbohydrates, and like it's just this pack of people going from one thing to another, and everything has a place in nutrition, and as we discussed before, is the number one thing is get rid of the crap. That would be because you
Yep.
just you can't go wrong there, and then figuring out what your particular needs are, and how those can change. Maybe during high training season or racing season, you might need more carbohydrates, but winter or when you're trying to build up, you need more protein, and you can get by with less carbohydrates. So, or if you're doing longer slow, then that's okay. But if you're doing fast, you require that additional fuel, and while you can get by and not be hungry on fats, the carbs are the twigs in the fireplace, and they'll create a higher energy, and you just can't miss that, and you're leaving something out. So it's
Yeah,
understanding where you are and what your needs are.
I like that. Well, let's wrap it right there because I think that's a perfect place to end. So, Rick Cohen, thank you so much for joining us on the Train Right podcast today. It's been awesome.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for everyone, for your time, and I'm happy to share.
All right, thanks.